Hello everyone, and welcome to the York Festival of Ideas. My name's Caroline Hunter. I'm from the York Law School here in the university, and I'll be chairing today's session, which is a celebration of 15 years of the law school. I'm so happy to see our head of school here as well, and some colleagues who are here, so it's lovely to have them here. But I'm particularly delighted to welcome Nazir Afzal to mark that occasion. Nazir is a solicitor, was the former Chief Prosecutor, the Chief Crown Prosecutor for the North West of England, and formerly the Director in London. I've got more things he's done. He's done a lot. He was Chief Executive at the country's Police and Crime Commissioners, and more recently the National Advisor to the Welsh Government. Through his 30-year career, he has prosecuted some of the most high-profile cases in the country. He's advised on many others. He has led nationally on some really important areas like violence to women and children, child sexual abuse, and honour-based violence. So really important issues that we should think about. He has had responsibility for 100,000 prosecutions a year. I just have a horrible feeling there aren't that many at the moment, given the state of our criminal justice. But his prosecutions of the so-called Rochdale grooming gang and similar ones were groundbreaking, and he has changed the landscape of child protection. Nazir has had lots of accolades, and in 2005 he was awarded the OBE by the Queen for his work. Today he's going to give us some insights about his groundbreaking career, the UK's relationship with race and power, and much more. So, over to you, Nazir.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Caroline, and happy birthday to York Law School. I'm still blown away by the fact it's only 15 years old. But anyway, I don't even know what 15th anniversary is. Anybody know what 15 is? If you were married 15 years? Well, whatever it is. Don't Google it. As I said, I'm delighted to be here. Thank you very much indeed for the invitation. It's lovely to be part of the Festival of Ideas. It's lovely to spend the hottest Sunday afternoon with you. And at least we're cool today. So I'm going to talk for about 40 minutes or thereabouts, and then we'll have an opportunity, I hope, for some questions. And I never have any red lines. You can ask me anything you like. Simple as that. As was said a moment ago, I mean, my family came from the very tribal and traditional tribalistic parts of northern Pakistan. They came to the very traditional tribalistic parts of Birmingham, where I was born, a long time ago. And those of us who are old enough to remember the 60s and 70s, remember the National Front and skinheads on the street. I would go to school, come back covered in saliva, not mine. And I would never go out on Saturday afternoon because it was scary, because football was on, and I was not far away from the nearest football ground. It was quite a challenging upbringing, but a loving home. And I think one needs to remember that some people don't necessarily have that either. I remember when I wanted to become a lawyer, those of us who are children of immigrants, some of you remember this, were told, be a doctor, be an engineer, be a scientist, on the basis that at some point they'll kick us out, and therefore we need a skill that can be useful back where we came from. And I didn't want to do that. I wanted to be a lawyer. But I didn't have any role models. It's much easier now. My role models growing up to be a lawyer were three. Atticus Finch, Mahatma Gandhi and Nelson Mandela. So we're talking about the 70s, late 70s, early 80s. And I remember having a conversation with my dad about this, and he said, well, one's fictional, one was murdered and the other one's in prison. And they're your role models. So it was a tough conversation, but nonetheless, he understood why I wanted to do it. And why I wanted to do it was simple. I myself had been beaten black and blue by racists. I had seen other people who had suffered harm, and none of us had sought help. Because we believed that we were not going to get help, that justice wasn't for us. It was for other people, and we were voiceless. And I thought, actually, that's not the way it should be. That maybe in some way, and in this respect, the law for me was the way, that I could perhaps change that in some small way for some people. I qualified from the University of Birmingham. I went to law school in Guildford, which I think is still there. And I first started work in defence practice in Birmingham at a time when I didn't enjoy it. I chose crime because that was a subject that I did enjoy when I was being educated. Yesterday, I was in London at the True Crime Conference, and just for your benefit, that's not a voyeuristic session, because there will never be a true conveyancing, there'll never be a true probate. People are interested in crime, people are interested in behaviours of that nature, and that's what intrigued me about this particular area of law. And when I did defence work, and by the way, I should say at the outset, we all need defence lawyers, and we need them properly funded to do the job that we expect of them, because we all at some point need their support and their guidance. But it wasn't for me. I remember one particular case I was dealing with when I was at the police station with a suspect. This was before, now you have video recorded interviews, so if you were the victim of an alleged victim of an abuse, you will be recorded giving your evidence, and that will be used as evidence in the trial. Back then, you would give a written statement to the police. A police officer, invariably male, would write down what it was that you said. And I remember being sat with somebody who was accused of rape, and I had before me the statement of the woman that said she was raped. And I had to read this out to him to be able to advise him. And I realised that he was actually getting off on it. And I thought, no, I don't want to be doing this. It's not in my nature to do this. Others can do this. I wasn't going to do that. And literally, I'm not kidding, the next day I resigned. I had no job to go to. It was a common occurrence in my life. And decided that that's not what I was going to do. And prosecuting was not on my agenda then, because we had a brand new independent prosecution service. It was only created 4 years before then. And it was created because, you will remember, some of you again, in the days of the police did their own prosecutions, you've got the Guildford 4, you've got the Birmingham 6, you've got cases where the police were not disclosing everything that would support or assist the defendants. And so there was a need for an independent prosecution service, and that had been created. And I thought, well, okay, I'll try this. I went to London, and in 1990 I became the baby prosecutor. That doesn't mean I prosecute babies. I literally was the most junior prosecutor in that particular building. But it was right in the centre of London. Literally, I was in Victoria. My court was Portsmouth Magistrates Court and the Old Bailey. I walked past what was then New Scotland Yard every day. And so I was right in it. And that, I think, is something that I took advantage of. Literally being at the centre of what was happening as far as justice was concerned. And I was able to deal with cases that were way beyond my pay grade. So within 2 years of starting, I was dealing with a serial killer. A man who murdered 5 gay men in London, Colin Island, you may or may not remember him. And that was me, with little to no experience prosecuting and preparing this case, and having done so. And I prosecuted Princess Diana's stalker, I prosecuted other celebrity and high-profile cases. And I was literally thrown in the deep end, because that was the time when we didn't have something which is the bane of our lives, but absolutely essential these days, and that's key performance indicators. We had no KPIs then. Nazir Afzal could go and do what he liked. If he made a mistake, he would learn from his mistake and get better at it. And that, I think, we've lost a little bit of that now. We've lost a lot of that now. Being able to learn on the job, being properly supervised, and doing things that will push your boundaries and challenge you in some way, shape, or form. So I was doing this, and very quickly I realised 2 things. I realised one thing particularly: everybody hated prosecutors. We had been created, and the police hated us, because the police did not want somebody checking their work. The public hated us, and they hated us because governments invariably, when they create something new, don't fund it properly. And so we were poorly funded. And that meant we would lose things. This is pre-computerization, paper was everywhere. We also were hated by the defense lawyers not because we were prosecutors, but because we were taking their best defense lawyers to become prosecutors. We were hated by the judges, the magistrates, who didn't want these new people in their courtrooms. And it was obvious that when you're being hated by everybody, that perhaps you're in the right place. And I remember very early on coming across somebody called Chief Vaz. Do you remember Chief Vaz? And he was a minister at that time, and he comes up to me and he says, when he learns I'm a prosecutor, he goes, "Lost any cases lately?" So I love you, man. A year later, if you remember, he was sacked. And I went to him again and I said, "Lost any jobs lately?" Karma works in many ways. But it was a bad time in that respect, but also it was an opportunity, and I took advantage of the opportunity. I mentioned that I walked past Scotland Yard every day. This was before we had the high security we have now. And I would walk in, and I would go up to talk to officers and say, "Right, what have you got? How can I help you?" And they were bewildered, really, that somebody would want to help them build their cases. And more importantly, we'll tell them those cases they should not bother with, because they're not going to go anywhere, and you're spending enormous amounts of time and resources that you could be spending on cases that, if you built properly, would succeed. And very quickly, I became the first contact for the paedophile unit, which was the national paedophile unit back then. And one of the reasons why I took on that role was because, well, it wasn't a role, it was just given to me, was because I was actually in awe of these officers. Just picture this. 8 o'clock every morning, they go into their office, they spend the whole day, 12 hours, looking at these images of children because they're all crime scenes. Every single one is a crime scene, trying to find perpetrators, victims, patterns of behavior, etc. They finish at 8, 9 p.m., they go home to their families, and they get up and do it again. And I was actually in awe of how these men, and they were invariably men back then, were capable of doing this, and they were doing it to protect the most vulnerable in society. And there was one particular case which never left me. Do you remember camcorders? Everybody's an adult in this room, I'm looking around, yeah. There was a case in which a mother had filmed on the camcorder her husband raping their 18-month-old baby. And to prepare the case, obviously, I had to look at the evidence, and I did look at the evidence. And I went home, and I had an 18-month-old daughter at the time, and I hugged her tightly and realized, actually, I don't have a job anymore, I have a mission. That my mission is that nobody else should have to suffer as she did. Nobody should suffer, regardless of who they are, where they are, and what they're doing. And that, I think, was a turning point for me. Very quickly, I progressed even higher up the ranks, and in 2001, I became the first non-white chief prosecutor in this country in London. And that was a testament to the leadership of Sir David Calvert-Smith, who was a DPP at the time. Because something happened in September 2011. Remember what happened? And 3 months after 9/11, he appoints the first ever Muslim chief prosecutor in this country. On merit, but he does that. And that says something about the man. Something about a leader who will not listen to people saying, "Can you trust him?" What, am I going to fly planes into buildings? You know? The point is, that was if you remember what it was like back then, anybody that was Muslim was being, across the world, was being told that you're in some way in league with terrorists. And he decided to appoint a chief prosecutor that was Muslim. And I think I owe him a great deal for doing that. And once he'd done that, I thought about it subsequently. I realized actually that I felt I owed him. I owed some greater loyalty. And that meant that I was going to work harder than ever before. And literally, I would work 7 days a week, 365 days a year, on cases and beyond. And I remember when I left prosecuting in 2015, I had 120 days leave to take. I would tell you how little leave I was actually taking. And that forced me out the door when they thought I needed a break. And I decided to do that. But also I realized the responsibility I had now as chief prosecutor. But actually, going back to my youth, what about those people who aren't heard? Let's listen. I said to there was a knife crime epidemic, the first of them, in 2002, and I said to my team, right, let's go out and talk to the people most impacted by knife crime. And they said, yes, let's invite them to our offices. How did you know? Nobody came. I said, I think you missed the word go out. We will go to them. I remember, sometimes you have to lead by example. I remember going above the bookmakers in Harrowing in North London, talking to all these young men, 40-odd men, all wearing bandanas across their faces, having a conversation about knife crime. And they taught me so much in that session. They taught me about the environment they lived in, the education they had, the poor policing, the fact they were scared very often. And that's why they felt the need to carry a knife. My rebuttal to that is, if you carry a knife, you're more likely to be harmed by the knife. You know? But anyway, it's a phenomenal conversation. And then I went back from that conversation to talk to the Home Office. This was the time, 2002, when the Home Office listened. I remember sat with various ministers and officials and saying, what can we build on the impact that we are hearing from people who are actually affected by crime? Not the lawyers, no disrespect to the lawyers in this room, not the professionals, the people who are impacted by behaviours. And so the first time in our history, we created our very first serious violent crime strategy in 2002. That was on the back of that conversation that I had. I remember when I went back to the office, by the way, after I've done this engagement with the public, first thing my HR director said to me was, you didn't carry out a risk assessment. So I'm back now, aren't I? See, we put process in the way to do the right thing. Anyway, so we now had serious violent crime strategy. We had now people who are doing the job better than we've ever done before. And I thought, this is great, let's do more of this. So I started inviting NGOs from all different organisations. So stalking group, women who were impacted by stalking came to see me and said, Nazir, you do not understand how bad things are. People are not taking stalking seriously. There are cards available in Clintons which say, I will follow you everywhere. You know, stalking has been belittled and made into a joke. And yet it's the reason why I'm a prisoner in my own home. I thought you were right, aren't you? So we developed, on the basis of those conversations, the first ever national strategy for tackling stalking. Antisocial behaviour. Do you remember a young woman called Fiona Pilkington? Some of you may remember. Fiona she had a daughter with severe learning difficulties. She was being treated with appallingly by locals, particularly young boys in the area, who were brutalising the family. Fiona killed herself and her daughter by setting fire to their car. And people like Fiona and others felt that we were not taking antisocial behaviour seriously. We were dealing with it as the lowest possible sentence, lowest possible crime, a bit of criminal damage here, a bit of disorderly behaviour, when the impact was that people like Fiona were totally and utterly prisoners in their own home, totally, utterly destroyed and traumatised by what they're experiencing. I said, well, right, we need to change that. And so we developed the first ever national guidelines for tackling antisocial behaviour. All of them, all of these things led by the people who are most impacted. When people say to me, Nazir, you're a phenomenal lawyer, blah, blah, blah. I'm a shit lawyer. The people who are the experts are the victims, the people who work in this field day in, day out. They are the experts. All I've done is amplify their voices and open a door for them to give them access to people that can change their lives in some way, shape or form. Forced marriage and home-based abuse, which Caroline touched on. A group came to me and said, do you have any idea how many forced marriages there are in this country? I said, no. And they said, well, we deal with 5,000 women a year. I said, what? In the United Kingdom? Yes, in the United Kingdom. I said, no idea, I have no idea. And if people don't agree to a forced marriage, they will suffer harm, including homicide. On so-called honor-killings, you may have heard of that. And I said, I didn't know any of this. I said, what I'll do, and one of the powers I had was to convene. So I organised a conference. At the time, I knew it was the first national conference on forced marriage and honor-based abuse. Subsequently, the US State Department told me that's the world's first conference on honor-based abuse and forced marriage. I didn't know that. I remember organising it, and I wanted parliamentarians to come and listen to the voices of survivors. And they all said, no, we're too busy. Probably watching practical porn or something, I don't know. But literally, they were just too busy. So what I did was, I organised a conference in the QE2 Centre. If you know London, that's right opposite the House of the Parliament. And I said, pop in. And to their credit, dozens of them popped in, and they would hear a survivor talking about their experiences, and they were changed too. And then it's not enough to have the conference. What do you do next? And I think the next thing was, right, what do we do next? Well, first things first, we need to define. We had no legal definitions. You now go online, you'll see a definition of harm-based abuse. I developed that. It's the international definition. It didn't exist. And it was developed by talking to survivors about what it meant, and then turning that into legalistic language, to put it bluntly. And secondly, no data. We had no data. We had no idea of the extent of this problem. And this is when you use your networks. And I had in my network, in my top pocket, one right now, a significant duty owed to me by the Metropolitan Police, who I'd helped like nobody's business all those years. And I said to them, would you do me a big favour? Would you go through every homicide last year, every one, and using this definition, identify how many of them were unrelated? And I said, Nazir, for you, yes. And they came back, and they said, Nazir, last year in the United Kingdom, in 2004, 12 women were killed in the name of honour in this country. And I said, shocking, I didn't know that, and nobody else will. Right, where am I going to go with that? Where do I go? To the Home Office, who will listen. And I said to them, right, we need to deal with this issue. Homicide is only the top of the tree, where else all the other crimes are occurring as well. So we then convened a group of interpersonal violence experts from every government department, education, welfare, health, you name it. We're all around this table, and we developed the very first national strategy for tackling honour-based abuse in forced marriage. And then I realised, actually, that it's not enough, and we need to learn as lawyers, it's not enough to have data and to have the law and to speak in legalistic language. Tell stories. Tell stories. So why did, for example, a young girl called Samara, why did she get murdered when she was, by her father, when she had a boyfriend? Well, she got murdered because her father found out at the age of 16 that she had a boyfriend. Her father found out she had a boyfriend because he was told by the school, your daughter wasn't in school yesterday, maybe it was something to do with her boyfriend. I don't blame the school. There was no training on the subject. And so as a result, a child is dead because of a failure of the system. That changed education. When I raised that with educators, they said, we're not going to do that anymore. So when over and over again we were getting all these cases that were coming back, and people were telling me now we're dealing with this case and we know it's honour related, and I didn't know this, again, some new information for you, that I've prosecuted more honour cases than anybody in the world. Because I led nationally on the subject. I had teams of prosecutors and police officers working day in, day out to put us in a position where we had never been before, in a crime that was hidden in plain sight, that was impacting every community, here in York, you name it, everywhere. Some people would argue that Charles and Diana was a forced marriage. Somebody told me that. I said, I'm not entirely sure about that. You make your own mind up. But you know, it's common, it happens everywhere, and we hadn't even started dealing with it. Now we were. But there was one particular case which really did change everything, and it was the case of a young woman called Nazir. She lived in London. She was 16 when she was forced into marriage. She was brutalised by her husband to the point where, by the age of 18, she was ready to report him for rape. She went to her parents and said to her father, if you don't take me back, I'm going to report him. So the family reluctantly allowed her home. A few months later, she falls in love for the very first time. And she's seen kissing her boyfriend outside of a tube station in South London by some busybody. That busybody then goes to her father and to her uncle and says, how dare your daughter kiss someone in public? Now, I'm guessing that your reaction wouldn't be as irrational as theirs, which was, Bernaz must die. They sat down that evening, a group of men decided that Bernaz must die. She was abducted off the streets of London. She was raped by one of her killers. We know she was raped because we put a listening device in his phone, and he said, I raped her because I wanted her to know, before she died, who was in control. And then she was buried in a suitcase 100 miles north in Birmingham. Nobody reports her missing. Why would you report your murdered daughter missing? When you murdered her. But thankfully, her boyfriend did report her missing. A phenomenal police officer called DCI Caroline Good and the team took it really, really seriously. And we worked together and we brought father, uncle, and another man to justice initially. We also learned that 2 men had fled to Iraq, and they were also part of this conspiracy. And we had no extradition treaty with Iraq. We still haven't. We didn't have it then. But we simply persuaded the Iraqi government, this is post-Saddam Hussein, 2006-7, we persuaded them to allow these two men, well, put them on a plane, bring them back. And we got them back. And they were convicted of murder. 5 men are in prison for life for the murder of a 19-year-old girl for kissing her boyfriend outside of a tube station. But she could have been saved on at least two occasions. On one occasion, she's sitting in her home, father walks in with marigold gloves on and carrying a bottle of brandy and says, drink this. And she says, well, she starts drinking it. She's not a drinker. And then realizes something's up. Smashes the window, runs down the street, approaches the woman police officer. The woman police officer sees his bloodied hands, the alcohol on the breath, and threatens to arrest her for a drunken disorderly behaviour. Now that's a bit of racism going on there. Yeah, that officer's been disciplined, probably still before her. On another occasion, when they do take her slightly seriously, she goes into a police station and she gives an interview about what's happened to her, at the end of which, or might happen to her, she hands over a list of, she says, these are the 5 men that will kill me. And says to the officer, what now? The officer says, I'll get back to you. Nobody took it seriously, but there were opportunities that could have saved her life, and they didn't. So Bernard's killing changed so much. First thing that changed was I'd never been to the funeral of somebody who was a victim of one of my crimes. But I decided, because her family wasn't going to go, that I should. Because who else is going to mourn her? So July the 14th, every year now, is the International Day for remembering the victims of honor killings. On the basis that nobody else will. The people responsible are not going to mourn them, so we should. So July the 14th is that day now. We've created that day especially. Secondly, we need to change everything. And we brought in our very first national guidelines for tackling honor-based abuse and forced marriage, policing, prosecution. But it wasn't enough about policing and prosecution. Literally, we have to go everywhere. First thing, we need to change the law. So the Forced Marriage Civil Protection Act 2007, it's on the statute book, looks great. You have no idea what a fight that was. The government weren't interested in the legislation. They weren't interested. And you know why they weren't interested? Because it would cost £2 million a year to bring in protection orders. And I said, okay. Sometimes the moral case isn't enough, sometimes the legal case, sometimes the ethical case. None is enough, sometimes the business case is what works. I sat down with the Attorney General at the time, and I said to him, do you know how much it costs to prosecute and investigate one homicide? It's £1 million. It's now 1.5. Back then it's £1 million. So if we can reduce the number of homicides by 2, that pays for this legislation. And to his credit, he said yes, and suddenly Tony Blair was behind it, government was behind it, it became enacted. And so in 2008, we brought in forced marriage protection laws, which means that anybody can go through, well not anybody, but social services, people with caring responsibilities can go through a court, get a protection order that will protect the victim from harm, take away a passport, you name that kind of stuff. I then literally, you mentioned, Carol, 100,000 plus cases a year. Yes, I was doing that, but great teams of lawyers and staff doing that. I could focus on the strategic stuff. And so literally, I spent the whole of 2008 traveling up and down the country in my spare time, not that I have any, explaining what everybody need to do differently. Those of you who've been to see a band recently, or not recently at all, will probably remember on the back of the shirt it says all the places the band went to. In 2008, my shirt would say the Royal College GPs, the Royal College of Midwives, the Choral Society of England and Wales, local government associations, everywhere I went, and I scared the shit out of them. What are you going to do to prevent a bananas happening on your watch? And to their credit, without exception, they're all brought in national violence. You work in social services, they exist. You work in children's services, they did not exist before 2008. And sometimes you have to take that responsibility. We often think somebody will. You know, I've learned the experience, nobody will. So you do, we do, I do. So we brought in that, and since 2008, in 15 years now, that's your birthday, in 15 years, more than 4,500 protection orders have been issued. That's more than 4,500 lives that we have saved. Government owe me big time, don't they? 4.5 billion. Yeah. But the point is, it would not happen unless you persuade people of the need for something to happen. I left London in 2011 because I'd had enough really of London life, and that was largely because my children were growing up. I was leaving for work before they woke up, and I was coming back after they'd gone to sleep, and I thought, that's not our life. So let's move to Manchester because it's going to be so much easier. I laugh. 2011, you probably remember the riots took place. You probably remember the Stepping Hill Hospital murders where a nurse was injecting saline drips with insulin. You may remember three householders in 3 months killed burglars on their premises. Every single one of these cases were national, international profile, and they were on my watch. But the one you all remember, I imagine, is grooming gangs. So I arrived in May 2011. I'd become aware of this concept of, I realized that we weren't dealing with sexual abuse very well across the board. And I asked my teams, do we have anything like the ones that the Times are reporting on? And they said, yes, we do. We have one where we did not prosecute. In 2008, a young girl, who's watched BBC film Three Girls? If you watch that BAFTA award winning, the actor who plays me is much more handsome than I am. I'll take that anytime, any day. Anyway, but that's this case. So 2008, she goes into a takeaway, she breaks it up, smashes it up, she's arrested by the police, she tells the police officer, I've been raped by this man. And the police officer says, thank you very much for sharing that, we'll carry out a ridiculously poor investigation for the next 11 months. And they do. At the end of which they go to Chief Prosecutor and say, well, we don't believe a word she's saying. She's got chaotic troubled background, she's involved in low-level drug taking, low-level criminality, why would the jury believe her? Prosecutor goes, well, if you don't believe her, police officers don't believe her, we won't believe her either. And the jury won't believe her, so end of case. Case is on. 2011, I'm now in the northwest of England, and I said, I believe every word she says. I believe every word she says. They said, you've got a problem. The problem is this. How do you go into a jury and say, to the jury, believe everything she says about the men that have been abusing her? We didn't, but we want you to. I said, well, look, that's the problem, isn't it? Well, this is what we do. I'm going to reverse this. I'm going to say, we got it wrong. Not she got it wrong, we got it wrong. You can probably imagine how that went in that particular conversation. Statutory authorities, public authorities, organisations don't admit to when they've got things wrong. They'll find all manner of language, Wednesbury and reasonableness for the lawyers in the room. They'll find all sorts of language to prevent them saying, I said, no, the only way we're going to get this case started is by saying, members of the jury, we got it wrong. Believe her, we believe her now. And I said, by the way, I'm chief, we're going to do that anyway. So we started that case. And in May 2012, 9 men were convicted of the rape of 47 girls. Because we had failed, by we I mean statutory authorities, failed in 2008, those men who were perpetrators felt they could get away with anything. And so even more victims. 47 victims by the time we dealt with in 2012. And then something happened which I wasn't really ready for. That was suddenly on the back of one case, I'm now the world's expert on sexual abuse. Because everybody's coming and said, tell us, David Cameron, remember him? He rang me up and said, what's going on in this thing? I said, bad men are abusing girls. There's nothing rocket science here about this. And we've all failed them because we've ignored these victims time and time again. The important thing to say is the ethnicity of the perpetrators is an issue, but it's not the issue. I kept saying this, I'll keep saying this. The issue is that a cohort, significant number of people in this country, invariably young women and young girls and young boys for that matter as well, are just not listened to. We used to have a saying, didn't it? Be seen and not be heard. We say to children. And then why are we surprised that when we do hear them, this is what they're saying? Time and time again. And then I was writing articles left, right and centre in national newspapers and other places to try and explain what was going on. And I said, look, 2/3 of all abuse of children happens in the family. Did you know that? 2/3 of all abuse happens in the family, with perpetrator being somebody you know. The second largest group of abused children happen online. Right now, for pennies, you can watch a child being sexually assaulted for you. I don't recommend it. Thirdly, the third largest group of abused children happen in institutions, in places of study, in places of worship. You name it, institutions, BBC, ITV, you name it. The group of abused children that happen on the street grooming of the type we just talked about, thousands of children, but the smallest. We are failing every one of those children, everywhere. So I was getting this message across, and then something happened that I wasn't even ready for, and that was far right decided that I damaged their narrative. Their narrative was that all black and brown people are abusers, when it became public knowledge that I was the one to prosecute this case, when others didn't, I damaged their narrative. So they put stuff on Facebook and fake news saying Nazir Afzal didn't prosecute these guys. It didn't matter that it's in Hampshire and people are carrying me through the streets of Manchester. They wanted people to believe that lie, and their thugs believed that lie. I prosecuted serious organised criminals by that time. Suddenly, I had thugs trying to break into my house. I had to have police protection outside of my... I had a police officer outside of my home for 2 weeks. I would tell my kids who were in their early teens, the Prime Minister's got a police officer outside his door. Don't worry. Yeah? But it was reassuring. I had panic alarms placed in every room in my house. I had to teach my kids how to use a panic alarm if we're attacked. I got in 1 week, to my team, 17,000 letters and emails calling for me to be sacked and deported. I was born in Birmingham, I love the place, I don't want to go back there. And they were determined. I remember I was protected by 2 things. One, the people around me, my team. I remember my PA, for example, running down the corridor with a letter which had feces in it. Don't tell it, don't tell it. They protected me from the worst excesses of what was done to me. And the second thing was my boss. Somebody called Keir Starmer, I don't know if you know him. I didn't know this at the time. This is what Keir did, and I didn't know this. He said, Nazir will have no meeting before 10 a.m. every morning because he needs to do the school run. Nazir will have no meeting between 3 and 4 in the afternoon because he has to do the school run. Nazir will not be invited to any conferences or overnight, which require an overnight stay because he needs to be at home to provide support and reassurance to the family. I was wondering why nobody's inviting me to it. It was only subsequently I learned that he'd done that for my protection. And it worked. Not only did it protect me, it made me realise that now I was involved. I need to do more. We set up the first national panel to tackle this issue. I asked for people up and down the country to share with me all the other cases we got wrong. And we were prosecuting left, right and centre. Stuart Hall, you name it. Max Clifford, remember him? Rolf Harris? We were prosecuting. We were prosecuting cases that we had never prosecuted before. We were doing it right, and for the first time in our history, when I left prosecuting in 2015, we had the highest conviction rate for the abuse of children in our history. In our history. We went from being rubbish to that in 4 years, working together with a commitment, with a focus, and with each. I've got very little time. I'm going to touch on my most recent book because it links into what I said. Firstly, I've written a book called The Race. My memoir is called Prosecutor. It's about to be turned into a new drama, by the way. It passed, another actor playing me, even more handsome than I was. And my most recent book, which came out paperback last week, it's called The Race to the Top. And it flows from a conversation I had with somebody called Theresa May. Remember her? And she said to me, how can there be racism in this country when you're the Chief Prosecutor? And I said, have you got a few minutes? And to her credit, she sat down and listened. I said, you have no idea what I've had to battle through. If I was John Smith when I prosecuted the Rochdale case, for example, do you think that would have happened to me? No. So to her credit, she did that. And I thought, well, my experience can't be the only experience. So I sat down with leaders across the country of colour from every institution, business, arts, culture, media, sports, law, you name it, and tried to get their experiences. And guess what? They've all had the same. And they're all having the same experiences right now. Right now they're suffering, but they're not able to talk about it. Some of them anonymously shared with me. One person who was one of the 100 most powerful media people in this country, you all know this person, said to me, Nazir, if I tell you on the record what happened to me, that's my career finished. You're the victim. And what hope is there for a junior member of staff to speak up when you won't speak up? That's my experience, and that's what the book captures. It tries to capture people's experiences. But the thing that runs through both my memoir and this book and my career is the fact that I want to amplify the voices of people that weren't being heard. I want to shine a light on those areas that we've had to turn a blind eye to. And why do we do that? We do that for 2 reasons. When I prosecuted Stuart Hall, BBC presenter, he was found guilty of the abuse of 11 women and girls going back 30 years, and he was found not guilty of the abuse of one. I remember going to one woman who was in her 30s, who the jury had not believed, and I said to her, or found not guilty, and I said to her, I'm really sorry that I couldn't give you closure. And she looked me in the eye and said, Nazir, you gave me closure the moment you believed me. And I thought, there's me thinking it's all about the process. There's me thinking it's all about system. It wasn't. It was about somebody somewhere listening and believing. That was a phenomenal change. And then last year, and I'll finish with the story, to give you a chance to ask questions. Last year, I've got the shittiest website known to man. It's Nazir Afzal.co.uk. And I haven't updated it, but it has I shouldn't tell you this. It has a contact page, and that I still get. So every day, 10, 12 women, usually women, contact me telling me about how badly they've been treated. Can I help them in some way, shape, or form? And I try where I can. But there was one email I got a year or so ago, and it said, "Dear Mr. Afzal, you won't remember me. I was one of the victims of Stool Hall. I now have terminal cancer. I only have a few weeks to live, and I wanted you to know that my life began when you gave me justice." And I thought for a couple of days, actually, what do I do? How do I reply to that? Thank you? No. I sent her my number. I said, "Could you mind if we speak?" And to my great honour, she rang me. And she explained that for the 30-odd years of her life, people had treated her with real disdain. That she was a fantasist. She would not be believed. That she had not suffered. That her trauma had been compounded by everybody else's reaction. Suddenly, when the guy had been convicted, she could begin her life. And here she was, at the end of her life, wanting to tell me that that's what happened. And she said, "You changed my life." And I thought long and hard about that. A few weeks later, she passed away. And I went to her funeral. I had no idea, I still to this day, well, I think I do now, why I went to her funeral. I don't know anybody. She was only somebody I'd never met, apart from 5 minutes in the court case. And yet I'm at her funeral. And as I'm there, and I realised why I'm here. She told me that what I had done and what we had done had changed her life. What I wanted to tell her is that she changed mine. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone, and thank you, Nazir, for a brilliant talk about your career and how important it was. We've got some time for some questions. I've got one just down there. Yeah, lovely.
So my question was, since in your course of career you have dealt with a lot of rape cases, so what I wanted to know was when rapists or they're sent to prison and when they're released, what are the statistics of them reoffending?
Well, the answer will be what the Minister of Justice tell you. I don't know what the current data is. But what I can tell you from experience is that generally sexual predators don't stop unless they are treated, and by that I mean rehabilitated, they will continue. That's been my experience. There are people I've prosecuted that will have committed reoffended. And I think the problem we have is, the problem I would raise in relation to that is two things. One is that we need to address the causes of rape. In every one of the rape cases I've prosecuted thousands of rapes, by the way. Not one of them was about sex. They're all about power and control. They're all about men controlling women, invariably, or children, or vulnerable people. And so that we need to address misogyny, we need to address sexism, we need to address those issues. Secondly, what happens in prison is key here, or as important. And we have I don't know anybody who works in a prison, but there's hardly any rehabilitation that takes place. At the moment, I checked last week, we've got about 400 places left in our country's prison system. That's it. 85,400 people are in. We have 400 places left. I don't see the government building any barges, by the way, for excess prisoners. But what I do see is people are getting bail because they can't accommodate them in the prison system. People who are actually one would have serious concerns about reoffending are being given bail because the judges, they would never admit to this, are probably being given some kind of talk that if you can find a way of being able to deal with them in the community rather than remand them in custody, then please do that. And I think that's a recipe for disaster. Those who are in prison, 23 and a half hours a day locked up. maybe one course a month from some psychologist. The likelihood is that when they leave prison, they'll be exactly the way they were, probably even angrier than when they went in, and therefore more dangerous. That's not a good news story. Next.
Thank you. There's one down here. Yes, thank you.
Okay, thanks. I just want to start by saying thank you for your work and for everything you've done. And my question, I love listening to the UN podcast, Awake at Night. So related to that, my question, simple one, but I think quite a hard one to answer, is what are you scared of? What genuinely scares you in your job?
Yeah, do you know, I was asked this question in the Observer a couple of weeks ago. I did the Observer, there's a thing on the Observer magazine, which they asked me that same question, what are you scared of? And I'll be honest with you, nothing scares me anymore. I mentioned the far-right attack. I didn't mention the fact that in 2006, after I prosecuted a group of radicalised terrorists, that I found myself on an Al-Qaeda hit list. So 16 years later, I'm still on an Al-Qaeda hit list. I'm here, I don't know if Al-Qaeda are. So when you're on an Islamist terror hit list and you've been attacked by the far right, and you're probably in the right place. And additionally, I'll be honest with you, I'm always worried about my children and my family. They shouldn't have to suffer as they have done for the things that I say or do. Right now, I don't work for anybody. I'm Chancellor of the University of Manchester, but I'm not employed with the University of Manchester. I'm chair of this. Tomorrow you're going to read my report on the Catholic Church. I am the chair of the Catholic Church's regulator. It's a Muslim boy. And tomorrow my report on Hexham Newcastle will land. You'll be all about it. But the point is, I'm not employed by any of these people, so I can say what I want. And I think it's important that we do. It's important that if we see something that's not right, British Transport Police text 61066. If you see something, see it, sort it, all right. I was on a train yesterday in my head. That's the point, is that we need to speak up. You know, I'm not saying that if you're silent, you're complicit. If you're silent, you create the atmosphere, the environment that enables people to think they can do what they want. Yeah? And the more, I'm fortunate, very privileged. I've worked to it, get to this stage, but I feel I can say what I want, when I want. And as though the only thing I'm concerned about is my family. Nobody should inflict upon them. I remember after the Rochdale case, there was stuff on social media saying horrible things about me. I never paid attention to it, but my kids were going, why are they saying this about you, Dad? What? I couldn't cope with that. I'm worried about their safety and ensuring that they're safe, but I don't care anymore, and I'll say what I want.
Okay, next question, if we've got any more. Yes, right at the back, thank you.
I was wondering how people of colour can have their voices heard when there's like a fundamental oppression or muffling in criminal cases, as accused, as victims, and as people like yourself, the lawyers who manage the system.
Well, I don't think I manage the system. The system's unmanageable. I'll go back to my point. I don't think you get anywhere by staying silent. The data speaks for itself. If you're a black person, you are 9 times more likely to be stopped and searched than a white person. You're more likely to be arrested, you're more likely to be charged, you're more likely to be sentenced, you're more likely to go to prison on the same evidence as a white person. More on the same evidence. That's when my brother died during COVID. We all lost people, didn't we, in COVID? Disproportionately, COVID had a massive impact on people of colour. A disproportionate impact. So there's health inequality, there's criminal justice inequality, which we touched on a moment ago. There's education. No disrespect to anybody in this environment, but until recently, there was only one Vice Chancellor of colour out of 143 institutions in this country, right? And when you look at chief executives of the NHS Trust is 25% black and minority ethnic, and there was, until last year, there was not one chief exec of an NHS Trust who was a person of colour. Something's not right, is it? That's structural. I did a review of London Fire Brigade, which you may or may not have seen, that came out at the end of November last year. And I found London Fire Brigade to be institutionally racist, institutionally misogynist, institutionally homophobic. And it had a massive impact on fire services across the country because people felt able to speak up. And they have been speaking up. And that's the important thing, is that we should always support networks. So where if it's a network here, network wherever it is, get your voices heard. And those of us who are in positions of influence or access, who have access, should be able to try and amplify those voices too. Because we can't have a situation where people are sidelined or prevented from progressing because of the colour of their skin, because of their gender, because of their sex, or because of their sexual orientation, whatever it may be. We're better than that. As a country, we're better than that. I think it's really important that we fight this and keep fighting this. I think it's a war that we will continue to win. We will win, but we just need to be relentless about it.
One over here, thank you.
Thank you. You said we could ask anything we wanted. How angry does Suella Braverman and her policies make you, given what you said? We're better than this, you say.
Yeah.
At the minute, it doesn't always feel like that, does it?
Well, I mean, I was at that Buckingham Palace reception in December where Lady Hussey wanted to know where I came from. Remember? She asked me a couple of times as well, but I didn't make anything of it. And I had a big badge saying Nazir Afzal, Chancellor, University of Manchester. University of Manchester. Anyway, so and Pretty Patel and Suella Braverman came towards me. And I thought that was not the opportunity for me to confront them on their views when that was meant to be a celebration of women. I was the old man there, it was celebrating women who are working in violence against women and girls. And I walked out. I literally walked out of Buckingham Palace because I did not want to have a confrontation with them. I think in the paperback version of my book, which came out this week, I've had a separate chapter about what Rishi Sunak and Suella Braverman doesn't mean to me. People make assumptions that if you've reached that position of power and responsibility, that representation is everything. It's not. None of us are old enough to remember the suffrage movement, but back in 1915, 16, 17, back then, there was a large group of women who were the anti-suffrage movement. There were women fighting women who wanted women's rights. I see Braverman, Patel, and their like in that group. And I use the language. I don't know if it's in the Sun and Mirror today. I've done an article where I say that she's been radicalised by racists. She may not admit to it, but she has been. She's not. I mentioned I quit. I quit the job as a defence lawyer. The other time I quit was when I was Chief Executive of Police Commissioners. I live in Manchester, and the Manchester Arena bombing happened. Remember that? And the day of that bombing, I was approached by community groups saying, "Nazir, please say something." And I said to my board, police and commissioners, the public want to hear me say something about this subject to provide reassurance. And my board said, "No, you can't." And I walked out of the door and I quit. And the point I wanted to make was that guy may well have been a Muslim. That wasn't what drove him. It was politics that drove him, whatever it was, that drove him to kill people, innocent people the way he did. But he wasn't me. He's not actually my name. And so Braverman and their ilk are not actually my name. I tried to be more subtle earlier on when I talked about Home Office listening 20 years ago. I'm now telling you how angry I am. I am very angry. And I've worked with 10 Attorney Generals. I've worked with probably 10 Home Secretaries last year. I've worked with, 10, 12 Home Secretaries during my career. And we have the worst in our history, in my living history. And that's not me just talking. And it's not the blob. What do they call it? The blob?
Yeah.
These officials who have given their whole lives to this service, they will tell you they just can't do it. They just can't cope at the lack of integrity. I think that's what it comes down to. I'm a truth teller. All of you are truth tellers. There's nothing more important than telling the truth. Last week she made a statement in Parliament. You remember that? It was about the immigration figure, 17,000 fewer or something. And it was put to her, that's wrong. It's not wrong, it's a lie. And she said, she was asked by the deputy speaker, would you put that right, please? And she goes, no. What? I don't know about you, I was going to admit to when I got something wrong, I tell you I got it wrong, I put it right. That's where we are right now. And there's some really good Conservative politicians. Dominic Grieve, good friend of mine, the best Attorney General I've worked with. So this is not party politics at work. So a Conservative Attorney General who I thought was the best we've ever had.
So we've got one here and one at the back. So take this one first and then
Thank you.
one right at the back.
You give some great examples of people's experiences with the police, and it's probably fair to say that trust in the police is pretty much on the floor at the moment. Obviously, you know, I'm not going to name in York in this room the name of somebody, obviously that was murdered and had a massive effect on people. But in light of that and that trust, it means that we're getting situations like the Nicola Bulley case, like with the mopeds in Manchester, where the police are having to justify themselves second by second, minute by minute after the case has happened. That's not any way to police. But then the police have kind of brought it on themselves. So my question to you is, if you were the chief constable, what would you do? You seem like a guy who would go in there and grasp it by the horns. How would you rebuild that trust?
Very good question. I've done this. I told you I did my review under fire brigade. I work with policing across the country. Let me say at the outset, there are thousands of phenomenal police officers who are dedicated to keeping you safe, keeping us safe. And I pay tribute to them for what they do. But like any community of 130,000 police officers, you will have bigots. And there's nothing worse than a bigot with a warrant card. Because they can use their bigotry to break down your door. They can use their bigotry to arrest you or go anywhere else. And what we found in London, the Met, was more than 1,000 officers currently being investigated. You're absolutely right. Trust is at, if not an all-time low, not far off it. And with anything, confidence comes from competence. If people are doing their job better, I don't know if you read this yesterday, in the Andy Cook was the HMI, Registered Inspector of Saudi annual report. In half the neighbourhoods in this country, 49% of neighbourhoods in this country, there hasn't been a solved burglary in the last 3 years. I was on the floor when I was reading that. So competence is what delivers confidence, and also communication. You said, they're good, well, not good, but they're communicating lots of stuff afterwards. We used to have great neighbourhood policing. Do we have it now? I don't know if we have it now. You used to know your local bobby. What's the opposite of a bobby? I don't know. Female version of a bobby. You used to know that person, and you'd be able to talk to them, and you'd have that relationship. You can trust the person you know. You can communicate with the person you know. You can't communicate with an institution. So my answer would be neighbourhood policing. People that you trust, that trust you, that you can share intelligence with, you can share, and they can talk to you, and they can involve you, and they engage you. Proper consultation. Too often, by the way, they consult. Here's our document, our new strategy. What do you think? By which time it's too late. It's all done and dusted. They're just doing it for tick box, and no tick box has saved anybody's life, right? So absolutely proper communication, proper consultation, really real competence, and demonstrating that they are working for you and not against you. But we used to have a tagline in the CPS, which was, I think it stopped in the 2000s. It was Crown Prosecution Service working in the interests of justice, you should say. And internally, it would be working in the interests of just us. And we may have got rid of the tagline.
So we've got one left right at the back before we finish.
Just wanted to thank you, Nazir. I've got a huge amount of admiration for you. I'm Helen Dye from Cambridgeshire. I've travelled up from Cambridge today. And as much as what you say is absolutely inspiring, and it warms my heart to know that there are people out there like you who know their subject matter, to speak from experience and provide us with some hope that there are ways to change the system. You've also, I found what you say depressing, because you've talked about the problems of right-wing press, institutional racism, the kind of biases, confirmation biases that a lot of us operate unconsciously, the shambolics of our politics. And I just wondered, yes, you've also talked about the importance of telling stories, and I think that's amazing. I think how we tell stories, how we create new narratives, really important. The necessity for personal responsibility, whether that's within our professions our professional statuses or within our communities as individuals. And you've also said you have to, or you did today, persuade people of the need that something has to happen. How, I wonder at the moment, it all feels like there's an awful lot that needs to happen, and not least that our right-wing press are a huge part of the problem, and the relationship with our politicians. And I just wonder what you might say about, yes, you said we need to tap into networks, build our allegiances, choose our friends and colleagues wisely, perhaps. But I didn't know if you've had anything addition, because it does feel like the odds are stacked against quite a lot of things.
I'll be honest with you. The story I told at the very end about Stuart Hall's victim, I've realised actually you can change the world one person at a time. I think that when we think, oh my God, that's too much, and we do this a lot, then we don't do anything. Because who was it that said you change the world one step at a time? Was the Buddha? I don't know who it was. I'm making it up now. You do it one person at a time, one step at a time. And before you know it, if we're all doing it, we're changing the world, aren't we? And I think that's the important thing. But I have an enormous amount of faith in our children. And this is where where hope comes from for me. I've got 4 between the ages of 22 and 27. They still want a lot of money. I have pictures of them in my wallet where my money used to be. But they are extraordinary. When I was 22, 23, I didn't have a view on anything. I can't remember having a view on anything. But they do. On the things that matter in this world, the things that really matter, and also they don't get their news the way we got our news. That's good news. They don't have to find it in the environments that you touched on earlier on. I remember the Press Standards organisation, by the way, so I'm not going to say any more about that. But the point is that they get their news, they network really well. My children have a WhatsApp group, which I have no access to whatsoever. I don't know what they're talking to each other about, but they're brilliant at engaging with each other and engaging more widely. So let's put our hope where it belongs, in the young of our country and of the world, because I think that they will have to fix the problems that we've created.
Thank you so much, Nazir, for that lovely ending, I hope. Take us away with some hope. And thank you for your great questions. Thank you all for coming. That's been brilliant. And thank you very much.